I can't get into the Zoom.
I can do chat for you.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Community Sustainable Living Advisory Committee meeting. Those of you on Zoom, thank you for dialing in, and hello. And we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Director Hewitt?
Chair, can I add something to the agenda before it's adopted, or do I do that after? Or how does that work?
If you move an amendment to the agenda.
So you do it now.
You do, and then you need 2/3 vote.
Right.
So do it as an amendment, requires 2/3 vote.
Okay.
So Cheryl, go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair, I was hoping to discuss with the CSLAC committee if they would be wanting to discuss changing the meetings from 6 meetings per year to 4 meetings per year. So, and I don't have any idea if anybody has any thoughts on that. The reason for that is that it just seems.
Wait, Cheryl.
Just give the title. Just give the title and then we discuss the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Done.
Okay. Change to 4 meetings per year.
So you need a second on that.
I need a second. Does anybody second that amendment to the agenda?
Sure. Director Popoff will second.
Okay, I've got a second. Thank you. And this does not get discussed,
Yeah,
correct?
it's an amendment to a motion, so
Right.
you can discuss the amendment.
Okay, is there anyone who wants to comment on the amendment before we go to a vote? Cheryl? Go ahead.
Thank you. The only reason I'm asking for this is that there seems like there's some of the meetings there's very few decisions to make. And I'm just thinking for the purposes of all of us, all of our time, and just to be like respectful to the people of the public that come to this. And today, like, I mean, I notice even today there's like only a few things on the agenda. So it's just really a time management reason and no other thing. But thank you for entertaining it. And either way, I'm good. I just thought I'd ask the committee what their thoughts were.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we take this to a vote on whether or not to admit this late item? Okay.
Have anybody in chat?
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of adding this to the agenda? Okay, any opposed? It carries.
Yeah,
So
Chair,
that will,
point
yeah.
of order.
go ahead.
Yeah, I see Director Weatherhead is trying to log on and I keep getting notifications as she's trying to log in Teams. Is she on this call or is she trying to do something different?
I'll look at that.
Okay,
I'll text her. She did accept it with us. So I don't know if you did roll call, Shelley, but there are people. I haven't done roll call. Yeah, so I think we need to do roll call and we need to verify that people aren't trying to pop into other meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, she is.
okay, so Director Weatherhead got in.
Still trying to connect to audio.
Okay, so we've got that item added to the agenda. So I'm gonna call the vote on adopting the agenda and then we will backtrack and do the roll call. Okay. So all those in favor of adopting the agenda as amended? 2, 3, 4. Any opposed?
I've got no one on video. I'm not
So
sure.
Tom was opposed. Okay, no, he was not opposed. No? You raised your hand when I called for opposition. Okay, it carries. So we're gonna pause and let Shelley do roll call.
Good morning. Director Jackson,
Present.
Director Tierney. He is trying, I've just texted him to tell him to use the Zoom link. Director Vandenberg, also not there, I'm texting him as well. Thank you. Director Watson, here. Director Graham,
Present.
Director Newell,
Present.
Director Cunningham. Director Schaffer,
I'm present.
Director Davidoff,
Present, thank you.
thank you. Director Pengrath, also not there. Cunningham doesn't text. Director Weatherhead, I'll send him an email, but thank you.
Hi, President, I'm here, but I had a really difficult time getting in here, and Roger is still stuck in this other Teams meeting room that we were both in together that nobody else was in.
We're working on it, Teresa, thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Just FYI, Tom here, I had to go in through the appointment calendar on the website. And I got in through that link, but the other one had me in nowhere.
Yeah.
So FYI.
Yeah, the invite went out with a Teams meeting link and not Zoom.
The Teams meeting seems to be triggered through the Zoom stuff, like we had the same thing in our executive meeting, it kept telling us to go to Teams, so it's an IT issue. We have to look up.
Yeah.
That's a Microsoft thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I went just to the agenda for the meeting yesterday and used that link because I presumed that was correct.
I couldn't get into this with anything.
My calendar was what I used. Oh, there's my number. Great. Good morning, Kelly, do you hear us?
Yes,
Thank you.
apologies. I had problems getting onto Zoom. Thank you.
Don't worry, you're one of several. Henny is away. So you won't be waiting for Henny, but we're still waiting for Cunningham. And Roger, yeah.
Shelley, Dr. Vandenberg is there not? That's okay, talk them through it.
Yeah,
Okay, almost what they see as well.
Shelby, thanks.
Okay.
What are we doing? It's not right now.
Okay, I want to move on.
Audio. Elvia's joined them.
Charmaine. Good morning, we have this report room. I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting and I just thought this was one of my directors. I don't even.
We are
Bye.
I just wanted to say we are having some, I've got it. I've got it. Present. So somebody inform the directors, please, that we are having.
And just, she's taking care of, everyone was invited.
Okay,
Yeah.
But-
Folks online, we're just figuring out some technical issues and we'll be right with you.
We're not muted online. You can just speak. Our hands on the phone. We don't have very good computer on.
Can you just call back?
It's going through the owl.
okay. Yeah, we are having some technical issues.
If you first speak, invite.
Are we good to go ahead or are we still waiting?
Cunningham is on the phone with Sangita, so
Okay, what
another
other
topic. It was just sent out to everybody.
Yeah, Angela, the stuff, okay, it was. Yeah, you should be receiving the link.
Yeah,
last meeting.
Yeah, we got him on phone.
and I had a major computer crash this morning as well, so.
Do you want to just, Hans, can you hear us? And Roger, can you hear us?
Yeah, just got in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you and everything's fine. But I have no picture. I'll try and get it on in a little while.
778-770-0011. Thanks, Teresa.
New this morning, Justin Timberlake has been arrested
Hans,
for
can you mute?
intoxicated in New York.
There you go.
And do we have any members of the public present?
Yeah, we do.
Can you,
They don't need to identify themselves.
okay, welcome. We will resume. We have adopted the agenda as amended, and now we have the minutes from the April 16th meeting. We've all had an opportunity to review that. Do I have a mover to adopt? Director Hewitt? A second?
They're just received.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
The board.
Yeah, sorry about that. My computer crashed this morning, just totally scrambled my brain as well as my computer. Okay, so we go to item 6, staff reports.
Through the chair to the chair, I don't think you did the land acknowledgement.
Yeah,
I did.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay, must have been while
Thank
we
you.
were
But-
talking.
Yeah.
Was good.
Good, because that is an important part of our meetings. Staff reports. For information. And item 7, old business. 7.1, so, Paris,
6.1 first.
we received that for information.
Could I speak to it a bit?
Okay, go
Great.
ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, through the chair. Just to provide some more words to the summary that's provided on page 2. First, on page 2 and 3, you'll notice that there's a change in the percentages from the last meeting that we had, which was in April. So the last meeting was still reflective of the work that was associated with the climate action work. We've since shifted that focus, and so we're now back to the more standard distribution of work, where 75% is it with CSLAC and 25% is with S100. And then specifically some updates on the various projects that are underway. The 2 projects that were approved by CSLAC through the budget process, the Elk Creek Conservation and Living Lakes groundwater monitoring, those contracts are in place and the projects are underway. The Watershed Governance Initiative, they're following the update that was provided in April. A letter was sent to the province. We have since received a response.
Recording in progress.
We've since received a response from the province as well, basically saying that they can't do very much until the election is over, but they did appreciate the work that had happened in our partnership with Yakinuki, and they recommended that both we identify funding sources and be more specific about our goals. Staff have since met with Yakanuki, and we're in the process of developing terms, but it's a very slow moving process at this point. And there is a board report in this package to request application of funding, which would support that process as well. The Flowcan Lake and River Partnership, we continue to work on the terms of reference and hope to see some further progress on that in the next few weeks. The Rural Grid Resilience Investigation, so our contract with Lynx expired at the end of the month, and they completed their duties. They are also doing a more formal report to the board, and so we look forward to hearing more about the progress of year 2. And here is provided a very brief update of year 1 progress. And then the Regional Active and Low Carbon Transportation Strategy, an update is provided in this agenda package as well, with possible next steps. In terms of board initiatives, the Central Kootenai Food Policy Council, so they presented to the board in May, and staff are preparing a report to the board in July. Climate Action Strategy, the RUCK Ideas for Climate Action was approved on April 18th. And again, staff are preparing a report on next steps expected in July to the board. And the Regional Invasive Species Plan Strategy, specifically the Regional Invasive Species Working Group. At this point, there's no funding that's been identified within the S100 budget. And so staff are working with trying to see if there is funding, but at this point, the potential is to put the working group on hiatus for a year. But there's likely another report. I've been working with talking to CCAS, and they're also in a transition point with having lost core funding, and so it's likely a bigger discussion for us at the board level. And then the final addition that was new is on page 3. You'll see that in the bullet points there's a list there of the new calendar or the new annual cycle that we proposed at the last meeting, where we follow the budgetary process and we make recommendations for funding after the budget is approved in March, and then call for applications and then evaluate applications and then launch applications in July. So that's all following the approval of the budget. We're off that cycle for now. So the next thing that we'd be looking forward to from this committee is the annual report that will come in December, based on the work that has happened in CSLAC, where there may be gaps, and what the CSLAC would like to emphasize for the following year. And that's all for me. Thank you.
You have David off on the speakers list.
Thank you. Through the chair, to staff. You mentioned CCAS lost its core funding, and I know I was an RDCK rep to CCAS. So why did they lose their core funding? Is that something that is public knowledge?
Yes, I haven't. Thank you, through the chair.
Yes.
I haven't been told otherwise. It was the change of strategy through Columbia Basin Trust. So Columbia Basin Trust was providing a lot of their funding, and so they're at this point they're very much in a reconfiguration mode, and so trying to understand how they can support their ongoing initiatives with that change in funding structure.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question, Chair, but I'll defer to anyone else first before I ask it.
Is there anyone else on the list? Okay, so go ahead, Director David.
Yeah, I tried to reach out to Living Lakes Canada because we want them to work with us on the Brilliant Head Pond Collaborative that we're working on right now. But I'm not getting any success in getting a response from anyone. So who am I? Is Kat Hartwig no longer involved? Like, I'm just emailing other people, but I'm not getting any emails responses. So who do I contact at Living Lakes? Who's a current contact that will respond? Because I'm not getting any responses from Living Lakes.
Okay, go ahead, Paris.
Thank you, through the chair. Unfortunately, I don't remember their last name, but Paige is the person that we work with in Nelson area, and I can send along her contact information to you, and she can be quite responsive.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Paris, I'm curious, so for links and the group design project, I had mentioned to them they may want to do a delegation to the board just to present how that all went. Is that something you've discussed with them? You have, okay. And do they know the process, or should I go ahead and send them the link to apply?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just mentioned mentioned that if she wanted to send her report to me or talk through the presentation, I'd be there to support. They didn't discuss the process per se, so I'm happy to follow up with her. And discuss process and make sure that she's familiar with that.
Yeah, through the chair, to send her the link to the delegation. If even though it was a project we funded, it's still have to go through the usual process.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Is there anything else on the, on this item? If not, we'll go ahead to 7.1. And this is for information. The Regional Active Transportation Investigation. First.
Thank you, through the chair. It's a bit confusing. It is for information, but there's also recommendations.
I was just going to mention.
So, and the report is really intended as an update, and so to provide a catch up from long ago when the resolution was adopted in 2022 and direction was given to staff. There's been a long period of time since 2022, and so a lot of the report and a lot of the attachments provide backup information or context information primarily for new directors that were part of that conversation. We did receive some great questions from Director Watson, and so I just want to provide a little bit more context, particularly that there's a gap, which I acknowledge, and I'm sorry about that, in the resolution that we received of preparing a detailed project report and the information that we provided in the report. Namely, we haven't acknowledged that what we intended to do, or the direction from the board, was to prepare a project summary. And through our work with community, we've understood that there's too many options for us to proceed with one particular option. And so that's why we're bringing it back to CSLAC. And so presenting the options that then would come with a project budget. There's also a question about why and where the direction came from us hosting a forum. And we did inform CSLAC in April that we intended to host a forum. We saw this as a process of gathering information. Again, we're in a unique position as the regional district because there aren't any clear solutions about how to proceed. And so part of our understanding of staff is that this is very much a community-led initiative and understanding what is our potential role as the RDCK, if there is a role at all. And so that was part of the intent of the forum, was to gather further information from those that are invested in it. Is there a role from the RDCK? Are there gaps, and what is the need? And so that's the response that we've provided in the report. There were some additional questions about the specifics of the working group, and great questions. The working group, if there was a working group established, it would be made up of many of the people that we've been working with or consulting with to try and draft this proposal. And that's those that are included in one of the attachments of the invitation list. That is all of this really is up for discussion. And so if there were directors or you wanted to participate as well, that would be, of course, very much possible. The area of focus would be the RDCK as a whole, and the goal of the working group would be to support ongoing action. So really to provide that coordination, regional coordination to support ongoing action. What we see is that there's a lot of disparate efforts across the regional district, and particularly between municipalities and rural areas. There's opportunity to, again, facilitate those conversations so that we're ensuring connectivity. And then from the nonprofit sector, that there's a lot of small initiatives that could serve to be supported by a regional initiative. The 15,000 that we're suggesting would be allocated to the working group for the 2-year budget would include staff time, and it's the community, the climate action assistant who would be dedicated their staff time to that position. So it would be on a contract position. My role as sustainability planner would be just to oversee it and provide updates to CSLAC. And then the question around the 50,000 as the pilot project fund. This is something that we've seen, and we, as part of this initiative, is us as a regional district trying out different initiatives in different communities. so that we can make something that's very specific to communities, recognizing again that a regional initiative or a regional solution isn't going to be the same across the region, that there needs to be highly specific localized solutions. And then my last comment, two last comments. One, that any of those projects, so they would be proposed by the working group, but they would come back to CSLAC for approval and discussion. And then the last question was around how to evaluate this in the context of LGCAP funding. And this is a bit of a, so the board has requested that we prepare a report on LGCAP spending, both what is in our current, what we've received to date and what we anticipate receiving. We are preparing a report to the board in July. So all that proposal will come in full in July. And what I can say at this point is that there's no trade-offs at this point. There's nothing that would be, if this was included in the proposal, and again, it would be for board discussion about whether or not it's actually funded. This isn't taking the place of other funding. And the other projects that are on our list at this date are other pilots, particularly the mobile chipper project. This was identified as a high area of interest by residents through the climate action engagement, continuing the grid resilience work, the distribution project that was proposed by the Food Policy Council at their presentation to the board, doing a feasibility study for zero emission vehicles for our core fleet. Yes, and other ideas like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paris. I do have a list.
You have Vandenberg and Davidoff in the chat as well.
Yes. So it will be Director Jackman, Director Watson, Director Vandenberg, and then Director Davidoff. Go ahead, Director Jackman.
Thank you. I've got a couple of really simple questions and then not so, and I just do one at a time. First, what is it, through the chair, the total LGCAP budget per year? What's it sit at right now, that allocation?
Thank you. So through the chair, we currently have about 240,000 in the account at the moment, or that we've received to date, with spending that's already been approved. And then we receive 143 times 3, which I believe is 400 and just under 400. No. Yeah. 420. Yes, and 143 times 3 in September is what we've received.
Or that's to cover
For 3 years.
Yeah, so 143 times 3 is what we receive in September.
Okay, 143,000 per year.
Yeah,
Yes,
that is our allocation.
Going forward, that's not.
Yeah.
That's for 2024, 2025, and 2026.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Director Jackman, go ahead.
Because it will be in July far easier, because this is a board decision to start tagging money when we see a more complete list.
Yeah.
And so it's almost odd to have the recommendation as specific as this now. It would be better to actually the entire recommendation be referred to July, but didn't necessarily want to truncate conversation, which is the point of having it here at all. And then just small clarification, because the way I read it, it wasn't clear if it was $15,000 sort of the working group money per year for 2 years, or $15,000 total over 2 years. That kind of detail. It's
Thank you, David Chair. It's 15,000 for 2 years, so 7.5 per year.
so not a great deal. Okay, so then the main point, if I can, that I recognize the value of leveraging the skills and input and time of volunteers and outside groups. That's always there's excellent value there. The geothermal one is a perfect example. We're at $250,000 plus. But if you actually added up all the time of those geologists and specialists, it'd be $500,000 probably. So, but what I'm wondering is if it'll be more clear by the time we get to July, if there was a funding envelope, would we run it similar to how we run the other one, to be like maximum $10,000 per initiative? If we would try maybe not to be regional, because it would get spread out, it would be sub-regional. We would want to target multiple different things, like maybe somebody wants a ride share here, somebody wants to manage bicycles and buses in another sub-region, somebody might want to connect some pathways. I was going to note Lumby put concrete curb and gutter and asphalt surfacing on their community pathway, which I see is over the top, and they need a dike. But I see this is how money's being spent. So that there may be, maybe there's one, the energy efficiency study for the Cooney Lake Ferry, that kind of stuff. So I would be good if in July it was better understood that we would be using a similar model to how we allocate money to outside groups now, application, process, the same timing, you just noticed those 5, 6 bullets. And then we limit it up to so many dollars. In that case, I wouldn't have any real difficulty with this recommendation kind of going forward, if that's the understanding that comes with it. Or otherwise, if we don't have much understanding what this means, that $50,000 means, is it one project, 1 year, then I wouldn't want to do this recommendation until we do understand. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, and I think the position will become clearer as
Yes,
all
we
directors
discuss.
have their opportunity to speak. Director Watson?
Thank you. Can you add Newell to the list as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Paris. You answered a lot of my questions, but I have more. So I will just say that I believe I'm comfortable with moving forward with the working group. I am not comfortable with moving forward with the pilot project for the details Dr. Jackman outlined in terms of detail. I'd much rather see if the projects would come back to us procedurally anyways, I don't want to approve that funding right now. While it may seem we have a good amount in the LG cap right now, that is a 3-year program. And there are a lot of other interests to be mindful of. I think the regional distribution is one that is pretty critical to our food system. And so I'm not in a position to support something without specific details, also not knowing which areas they are. I like the idea of a working group being able to be specific around this area can do this area can do that, and they can be leveraging funds for the bigger ones. So I feel like if we look at July, what else is happening with LG Cap, and then have them come back on a per project basis, I'm much more comfortable with that. And I think you answered my questions. I mean, the main thing I was concerned with was the staff time. The staff time related to when it's a regional active transit, it's very nuanced, it's a bit vague, and I understand that's how some of this work works, but you are funded and the staff are funded through CSLAC specifically. So we have that disparity between, okay, great, are we working in Nelson? Because how does Nelson participate in this? Questions like that, or Castlegar, or Nacast. But my last note and question is actually, how is this connected to the West Transit Service? Because there are direct correlations there, and while we're trying to convene people and work together, we have to be clear that we're also doing that within our own services. So I'd much rather see this actually go through transit services so those connections are really clear. So how is it connected to those services? And I'll support a motion to do the working group, but not the pilot project at this time.
Thank you, through the chair. Great question around the services. What we've understood from Tom is that because his service or the service that he supports is so explicit that anything that's beyond transit cannot be included. So because this is a larger consideration of active transportation, we can't be, the interest would be to create an active transportation service as opposed to the very specific service that he supports at this time. That said, with that not necessarily in the work at the moment, we work closely with Tom. So Tom wasn't able to attend this meeting. Mark did Mark Crow attend the meeting from Parks. Just to give an example of staff planning, some planning staff were also involved. So we try as best possible to see this as a collaborative initiative across staff. So we're working closely with transit.
Supplemental?
Yes.
So I think, I understand legislatively, the transit funds are very specific, noting BC Transit is getting involved in active transportation. I think there's still an opportunity, and I do not think we would be limited within the transit service to at least bring the items of interest to that committee. Because what I'm more interested in is actually the directors from Nelson and Castlegar. We're working with large transit services to understand the things that we're also doing from the active transit perspective. So it wouldn't be seeking funds from them. It wouldn't be going outside the taxation parameters of that service, that it would be broadening the connection to the elected officials in those areas. So I would approach Tom and ask if that would be possible.
Yeah. Through the chair, if I could ask a follow-up, is that the transit committee just as information?
Yes. Information, and when there's, if there are projects that buffer Nelson, that's how you connect to them. And you can bring it to them as an FYI and then determine the process for the process for any kind of how are they involved. And sort of weatherheads on the list as well now.
Okay, and, do you have any comment to make on that because of the transit connection?
Well, I think, through the chair, I think that's probably more suited to ask, Tom that question.
Okay.
To see how it fits in with, but it makes sense.
Okay. Thank you, Director Watson. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. The sound is not the greatest, and I don't know that, I think Director Watson was kind of running, was asking her questions in terms of what was on my mind, but I'll just so I apologize if it's any duplication. I guess, first of all, I could too support option 2, that is that of the working group. But Paris, if you could, I missed the part where who would be on that working group. I didn't catch that part. Secondly, before you answer that question, the current interviews, the transportation interviews that are taking place, how is that related to this? And does that not work to inform potentially what, and I'm going to option 3 now, inform that type of work that is proposed in option 3? And then the last question, again, on option 3 is there a business case that has been put together and available for what the intended outcomes would be from a pilot? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your question. So the composition of the working group, well, nothing's been defined to date, and perhaps a next step would be for us to bring back terms of reference for that working group to CSLAC for review in August. With the composition of the working group, the intent would be that it would be those that we've been that have expressed interest in this collaborative for since our engagements, and the list of items, the list of people that we have been engaged with is included as an attachment. So it includes industry folks, private business, includes the Selkirk College, transit advocates, interior health. Moti is often invited, but hasn't responded. And if CSLAC expressed interest as well in being present, we would of course make place for directors as well. So that's largely the intent is to be as broad and as representative as possible, really supporting the rural areas across the regional district. The second question was the transportation interviews, and that is quite distinct. It's not connected to this specifically, and at this time we as staff don't have any connection to that. And then in terms of the business case, yes, thank you very much. No, our intent is to bring a very when we propose the LGCAP, when we are proposing the LGCAP funding, we will be including a high-level analysis there of all of the projects that we are proposing. And if there's interest, and this would be one that we're including, whatever is recommended, if there is a recommendation. And if there's a desire for further business cases beyond the analysis that we're providing, we would provide that. But no, it hasn't been established at this time.
Supplemental, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Then, based on your answer on the transportation interviews, Paris, is it fair to ask you, what is that exercise going to inform then? What is the purpose of us participating in the transportation interviews? How is it going to inform our governance and decision making?
Thank you, through the chair. Unfortunately, I can't speak to that. But yes, yes. Thank you,
Dr. Watson.
So the interviews are around informing how to do an apportionment formula that's based on the values as set by those that are being interviewed. So currently the formula is really outdated. And so the whole process of that interview process is to glean what are our values as elected officials, what do we know in our communities we want to be able to consider in creating the formula that sets the taxation rate. So is it population? Is it distance? Is it opportunity, things like that. So it's all about being able to create an apportionment formula that is up to date and to current values.
Director Vandenberg, did that give you the information you were looking for?
Yes, and I thank Director Watson for that response. Of course, I'm always interested in knowing when are we going to hear the results of this apportionment. But I mean, I guess that's for a different table. That's it from me.
Thank you. Director Davidoff.
Yeah, a very interesting conversation. A lot of my questions have been answered as well. The nexus between all these things are connected, pun intended. Basically, we have a meeting coming up on transit that the interviews are connected to this. But I was just looking at the LGCAP funding. Did I hear staff say to the chair that there's a projected revenue from LGCAP grant funding over a period of 2 or 3 years? Because I don't see that in the 5-year financial plan.
Paris, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes. LGCAP there's been 2 allocations that we've received. The first one was that there was a commitment of 2 years of funding. So 2022, 2023 at the revised amount of 143,000. And then the province, and then that was actually for 3 years. And then they announced this spring that they would be continuing it for another 2 years. And that for the remaining 3 years, which is 2024, 2025, 2026, they would be making a one-time allocation in September of 143 times 30. I'm sorry, I don't have that number.
429.
Thank you, 429,000. And so what staff are preparing is both a proposal on how to spend the current funding because it needs to be spent by March 2025, and then also a framework for how to spend the funding that we will be receiving in September.
Okay, supplemental chair, just a comment.
Yes.
That helps explain why it wouldn't be in the 5-year financial plan, because that was a late announcement, kind of an election type of announcement that they made, that the government made. And so basically, I guess it's a good problem for us to have, but we need to obviously do a lot of homework before we make decisions. And I concur with Chair Watson's comments that we really need clearly defined goals, and Kelly's comment about a business case analysis for everything that we're going to be doing moving forward, now that we are going to have over $500,000 to spend over a period of 3 years when you look at requisition and grants. So yeah, there's a wealth of riches, but we really need to make sure that we don't run into ratepayer question issues where you're getting this money, what are you doing with it? I think staff gets it. I hope we will see really well fleshed out business case analyses for whatever projects we are going to be moving forward on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Davidoff. We will be getting a report on the LGCAP issue in July. So I think that many of those questions will be answered at that time. Director Newell.
Thank you. Just give me a second here. I'd like to, if I may, Chair, I just wanted to clarify the CKIS thing, a bit slow off the mark. And it does kind of maybe semi-connect with some of the decisions we need to make. Could I just update a little bit on the core funding thing for the board?
Back to 6.1.
Yeah. Can you hold that till we've had all the questions on this item? And I'll get back to you. Okay, so I'll get back to you, Director Newell, and we go to Director Weatherhead.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, I actually, most of my questions have been answered through Director Watson and Vandenberg. One other question that I had was, when we look out the pros and cons of option A, B, and C, when it says a con, it would not support public interest if we didn't support this. And my question is where have we derived this public support or public interest in this actioning? Is this just coming through, the because it just doesn't seem to represent my area K, which and in terms of active transportation with the village of Nakusp, they're not part of CSLAC, but they've taken matters into their own hands, and it will cross over into some of my area, and I will be supporting that. But I'm just curious about where we derive public interest to determine that all of the regional district is interested in this.
Thank you. Through the chair. So there's three primary sources, or three sources of interest. One, two are select audiences. So where we've contacted folks that are very much interested in this issue. And that was both through the think tank that we held 2 years ago, which led to the initial direction on this resolution. There was strong interest at that time. And then also the forum that we hosted this time, there was strong interest. Of course, that is a select group. Those are folks that are invested in that topic. But really, when we speak to public interest, it's referencing that this was the primary topic of interest through the climate action engagement. It received the most comments. And I'd say it was generated those in favor, those against, those in between, but it was the topic of discussion when we were through the engagement process. So that's where there's been interest from staff to understand better what that means. And most of the questions were related to transit. So better access to transit, better access to trails, and greater connectivity when making the connection between like riding a bike to a bus stop and then getting off the bus and having options, those kinds of discussions as well, motorized trails. Anyhow, I can go on, but yes, it was, that's the primary area of interest, or that's the primary source for that statement.
Thank you. Supplemental to that, then, how did you determine from the climate action comments made as to what region these comments were coming from, which areas they were coming from? Because it seemed very blanketed, and I'm not really quite sure how we determine which areas were interested in what.
Thank you. Through the chair, unfortunately, I don't have that data at hand. I can provide that to you by email. We have broken down all the responses by area. And so I can provide that data, and specifically to Area K, of how people responded to transportation in Area K. Yes, if you allow me, I'll follow up on that question.
Thank you.
Director Watson, is that?
Yeah, just to let Director Weatherhead know, if you go to eScribe for April, all of the reports attached to the climate change initiative included the breakdown by area. So you can look down through the attachments and it should be there with a chart. And you have Graham on the list as well.
Yes. Director Graham.
Thank you through the chair. And I only have one question, and I'm trying to understand this LGCAP funding. And so my question is to staff, who mentioned there's $240,000 existing. And I don't see it in S105 because we are only showing $48,621 in grants specified. So I'm wondering, where is this money to be seen in the financial plan?
Harris.
Thank you, through the chair. So the LGCAP, Local Government Climate Action Program, as it may be written out in the budget, is received in S100. And then it's allocated to A108. And so A108 is an allocation fund. But the amount would be in S100 as a summary of existing budget.
Does that help, Director Graham?
Thank you. I'm going to look it up and make some notes right now. Thanks.
Okay. So I want to circle back briefly to Director Newell. Is this connected with the discussion we're having now? Can I complete the discussion on this item and then go back to your question about the CEDAS?
In my creative mind, I was going to try and connect it, but I'd rather not have to think that hard. So let's finish this.
I understand. Okay, so is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? Questions on this item only? Director Watson.
I'll move a motion.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I just gotta flip back to width of my 100 screen, so he's grabbed it on, there we go. I will move option. Sorry, it's so hard, you guys not taking pictures.
2 is the working group
Yeah.
only.
Thank you, I'll move the working group only.
so that's option 2.
Yeah, and I'll read it just so everybody knows where we're at.
Okay,
That's the actual motion.
And do you want me to read it?
Yeah, if you've got option 2 there, yes, please.
I've got option 2, Regional Transportation Collaborative Working Group indicates.
I think that's the description.
I can read it.
Okay, go ahead, Paris.
That the RDCK board directs staff to establish a collaborative working group in partnership with regional industry, local governments, and community organizations. And further, that the 15,000 in associated costs be, that up to 15,000 in associated costs be included in the July 2024 LG CAP funding proposal to the board.
That's what I moved.
Okay, and
Second.
do we have a second? Okay.
And you have Vandenberg on the list.
Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. I was going to move option 2. However, is it necessary to ensure that in that motion, it's clear that the terms of reference needs to be approved prior to this working group being formalized?
Director Watson.
I would suggest that we include that the working group would be a part of developing the terms of reference. So I would suggest we can add it in further that the terms of reference come back to the CSLAC committee for review. But I wouldn't suggest that the terms of reference is created in advance of the working group. Usually working groups are part of that terms of reference creation.
And I thank you for that. I'm in agreement.
Okay. So it's the motion to include the terms of reference. We'll come back to CSLAC for approval.
If my seconder is good with that as a friendly amendment, yeah, thank you. Did you get that, Shelley? Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I am going to call the question on,
It was just someone's computer. I don't have anyone in chat.
okay. Okay, I'm going to call the question on that motion. Those in favor? Is anyone opposed? Okay, it carries. Thank you. That was good discussion, good questions. And now we go back to Director Newell. You wanted to pick up on 6.1. Under
Thank you.
6.1 on the CPIS.
Yeah, thanks. Yesterday, Director Vandenberg and myself received an email from Lori Carr, the Executive Director of CKIS. And I just wanted to clarify the core funding that she referred to and was referred to had to do with our last board meeting where Johnny Strelayev mentioned the Columbia Basin Trust evolving its mandate. And CKIS had received core funding from the CBT over the years for what was deemed educational funding, and which was essentially core funding that could be used for partnership building, coordination, public contacts, and basically supporting the building of the relationship with the regional districts, including the RDCK. This evolution of funding will have some effect because it did use to support the executive director's salary. And I guess the tie-in I was going to make, like active transportation and having is good. Like everything's good we do. It's just trying to find a way to prioritize. And I've repeated often, and some board members agree and some disagree, that our relationship with invasive species, I think we would benefit from focusing more of our funding on this particular issue, and perhaps other issues maybe way beyond our scope. Active transportation's good and people biking here and there, but when you're out at 8 Mile out here where I live, you're biking for pleasure, not for actual business, whereas invasive species are really affecting us. So I just wanted to update what the core funding was, because it was alluded to, and I hope that we can continue our relationship with CKIS and perhaps support them. So thanks, Chair, for the latitude of me being a little slow off the mark in responding to that earlier question and issue under 7.1.
No problem. Thank you very much for that. And Director Watson, I believe, wanted to add to or respond to that.
There's, through the chair to Director Newell, and it's a broader conversation, but just an opportunity. I think I'd mentioned it a few times ago, the Kootenay Lake Conservation Fund, while CKIS in a lot of its work that might be more operational might not qualify, there are really creative ways where there's a really cool project happening up in the flats at the head of Kootenay Lake, where they're using native plant replanting to take over. They're essentially using the reverse process of invasive species and using native plants. And I've encouraged them to look at the Conservation Service because they're actually increasing the biodiversity in their efforts to remove invasive species. And they're doing very well. They're also incorporating agriculture into it. And they're incorporating hugelculture as well. So there's some really good creative opportunities to look at building ecology out while dealing with invasive species. And that might be an opportunity under the Conservation Fund.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, so you'll look into that, Director Newell?
I started something, you've got Vandenberg on.
I see that.
Sorry.
Director Vandenberg, go ahead.
Thank you, and I want to thank Director Newell for catching that as it went by. I too think that invasive species is a very important work, and it's unclear as to what direction that can go in. The work that CKIS is starting is really important. As being a part of the working group, we can't meet again until we have this funding for Lori's position resolved. So any of the momentum that we had started with is at a halt, and there is some good suggestions and ideas, and it is extremely important that we put our resources. We're a rural regional district, and invasive species is critical to the success of our agriculture. And I'm not clear at this point in this discussion that we in fact will be looking at some funding to continue the work. And I don't know that we really have a lot of time to defer this. I'm not really sure how we got here without the funding, but I think it's extremely important.
Oh, sorry, I'm not on Zoom.
Okay. So, Director Graham, on this topic?
Oh, thank you. Yes, through the chair. So like I'm completely confused on the invasive species topic because it's my understanding that this is provincial jurisdiction. And I understand CKIS was like a nonprofit, and okay, that's great. And they were working like with the province and maybe working with us, but like, aren't we as taxpayers paying taxes and the province is supposed to be doing this? And shouldn't we be advocating? I don't know. So this is just me Googling who's responsible for invasive species in BC and having it pop up with the province of BC and their database system, their management plans, and their societies and committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Graham. Harris.
If I'm,
Thank you.
oh, go ahead.
No. Okay, Director Newell, Go ahead, and then we're gonna go to Paris for comment on that. So Tom, go ahead.
The Weed Act says owners of private land are responsible, and thus the province would be responsible for rights of way and transportation, who does contribute to CKIS to some extent. And the private landowners are also responsible. And regional districts do tax for invasive species work. Kootenai Boundary does $300,000-400,000, I think, is their budget over there. Anyway, it is complex for sure in response to Director Graham, for sure. Sorry, Paris, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Paris.
Thank you, through the chair. I was going to say the same, is that, yes, we're directed by legislation to manage our own properties. And so the RDCK is currently managing its properties. And also there's an opportunity for the RDCK playing a leadership advocacy role. This is also a board issue. And so we have, there have been reports that have gone to the board, and that has been the funding source to date is S100.
Okay. So I think, absent a request to include this as a project under CSLAC, that, there's not much we can do. It has to go through the usual process. Director Watson.
So I would just suggest that if any of the directors want to encourage funding for this, it needs to go through the application process that Chairman just indicated. And because this is not on our agenda, we do need to be cautious about continuing discussion on it. It's also a board-funded initiative that rests with the board. So I would suggest we don't continue the discussion at this time. There are applications through CSLAC that can be made, but they would be deferred to next year. Or they could go on the LG cap. I don't know if they qualify under those funding, but there are opportunities there. But the conversation should rest at the board table and follow the procedures.
Yeah. So Director, maybe you could have a separate conversation with Paris, who could help inform you of the way to move forward on that.
Yes, Chair. And because we did talk about it under 7.1, I felt it was appropriate, but the chair is correct. We can't go into major detail because it's not a specific agenda item. I just wanted to update the committee and the board on where things are at and the understanding of that core funding change, where it actually was. Thank you.
Okay, so on to 7.2. Community Works application for natural asset management of Weimer Watershed, Quartz Creek. Paris.
Thank you, through the chair. Not to express over emotion, but it is exciting to finally be bringing this to CSLAC. It's a long-standing item that has been that was deferred because of lack of time. So the request to CSLAC is to approve and make recommendation to the board for the allocation of community works funding to do a natural asset management plan on Weimer Watershed and Quartz Creek. We do have a slight amendment to the resolution just for procedural purposes, just in the further comments. If we get to that point, I can make that recommendation. And I think Shelley put it in the chat.
Oh, right, that was the one that came in. It also came via email, but if it's going in the chat, everyone watch the chat. And then,
You have Director Cunningham, and if anyone came on after that was in chat, I don't know that they'll see it, so you might want to re-put it.
Okay.
Re-put it, that's good.
Okay, so Director Cunningham, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, quickly, I'd like to move the recommendation. Would you want me to read it, or? It's rather simple, and of course, the monies will come from my community works funding. So therefore, there'll be only a slight. And also, I understand the idea is to actually, it says something that we're going to hire a consultant to do the work. In other words, so there shouldn't be any too much staff time or too much staff.
Right.
Yeah, so therefore, it should be able to go ahead right away. But
Okay.
however, the motion is I'll move it as recommended and written, and if I get a seconder.
Okay, so Director Cunningham, that is with the amended motion that is in the chat right now.
Just a moment. Could somebody read that out, please?
Okay, that the Community Works Fund application submitted by RDCK for the project titled Weimer Watershed Natural Asset Management Plan in the amount of $60,000 be approved and the funds be dispersed from Community Works Fund allocated to Electoral Area G and allocated to S105 Community Sustainable Living Service.
Yes.
Further, that the 2024-2029 financial plan for S105 CSLAC be amended as follows. Revenues to show receipt of an additional $60,000 in the grants line and expenses to show expenditure of an additional $60,000 in the contracted services line.
You have David off on the list as well.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so you have moved that. We need a second before we can engage.
I'll
in-
second for discussion and I'd
Okay.
like to be in the list as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Speaking to it, it also says, as you know, a request for proposal and subsequent contracts. So I don't expect staff to be able to do more than just a minimal amount of work with this. And also there is a little bit of a, well, everything takes time, but there's a little bit of a need for this thing to be done as quickly as possible because of the problems we are having with regards to protecting this watershed.
I agree with the timeliness of this, so we'll go through the speakers list, and I have Davidoff and then Jackman. So Director Davidoff, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question, I guess, is to the Chair, to Director Cunningham. I've been tracking the Quartz Creek watershed issues very carefully, even the switch from, BC Timber Sales reassigning its timber tenure to another tenure holder, and just the machinations have been incredible. We had a watershed issue in our watershed, and what we ended up doing is we ended up purchasing the key property in the watershed, and 43 property owners combined to raise a $30,000 legal defense fund and over $200,000 to purchase the property. So it cost us $250,000 to do this. And we did come to the regional district in the mid-90s asking for help on what we could do to protect our watershed. And my daughter, who was 8 years old at the time, did a Stop Watershed Predator sign that was really interesting as well. So a lot of emotion around that. So my question to Hans is that, do you think this is going to help in the long haul, moving us further on watershed protection, watershed governance, all of those pieces?
Director Cunningham, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Through the Chair. Yeah, yes, of course it'll help. And this is part of the thing because there are many things that go into the protection of a watershed, everything from perhaps some special species to, of course, community use. And of course, the question of logging in the watershed is difficult, especially if your logging is going to cause such things as acid rock discharge, which would definitely pollute the water, and or the building of roads or the logging of sections so that there is not sufficient flow. A report that can pull all these things together, I think, is excellent because we will be submitting it to the province, I'm sure, among other things. The report will do, of course, is for both the good of ourselves as the purveyor of water, but also the Weimer Water Community Group that is interested in making sure that our watershed stays clean.
Supplemental, Chair.
If you can make it short, yes.
Yeah, well, the key thing is that Area G is footing the bill for this. And I was just wondering, because if this is something that is kind of a pilot for all of us, a nature-based kind of watershed planning, would it be worthy or would it be possible for us to contribute to this rather than having Area G foot the whole bill? Because if this is something that's going to help all of us, and there's going to be more and more pressure on our watersheds moving forward with the lack of fiber right now that we're hearing about nonstop in the forest industry, I wouldn't have a problem contributing to this if it's going to really help us address some of the issues in our area. And I'm just wondering if staff considered that, or is that something that the director in the area consider, like getting all of us to kick in, say by $5,000 and easing the burden in Area G? I mean, if a bunch of us kicked in $5,000 or $10,000, is this something that has been considered? Because there was no ask of us to contribute to this pilot.
Director Davidoff, I will assume that Director Cunningham looked at these options and decided on the most efficient one. Director Watson wanted to comment, and then staff wanted to comment, and then I'll go back to the speakers list.
Just to note that there is a critical difference with Quartz Creek in that we own the water system that's connected to the watershed, which does enable us to have the ability to do a watershed assessment. When we don't own the water system, that's much more difficult to do. So there isn't necessarily the same playing field when it comes to doing other ones. I'm not going to debate if others want to contribute, that's totally up to you. But just to be clear that we don't have the same ability to work in other watersheds when we don't own the water system. It does change the playing field. And sorry, Shelley, if you can note, Director Vandenberg has left the meeting.
Okay, so
you have to pop off on the list.
Yes, I've got that. Okay, thank you. Staff wanted to comment at this point in the discussion, and then we will resume the speakers list with Directors Jackman, myself, and Papa. So staff, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that there are really, at this point, we've done some investigation and pilots and things like that. Some started, some not. And natural asset management inventories that is being proposed here, nature-based planning and cumulative impacts analysis are all three are technical approaches to understanding what's going on within a watershed as part of the bigger picture on watershed governance initiative to inform how we approach our work related to watershed governance overall. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. So, Director Jackman.
Yeah, thanks. Couple of observations, and I'll break down a little further. Normally, we put these applications through the rural committee, and guess they'd go anywhere. They just need board approval. The breakdown, the $60,000. It says consultant cost $50,000, admin $10,000, and there's another project management RDCK in kind $10,000. So I kind of better understand that. I think comment from Chair Watson was germane, because we initially, this is where we moved money to, was our water systems or other water systems where we could. And then it was pretty clear who the staff working on it, of course, it was Greendale Water System or wherever. That's who the staff, all that time came out of that budget, that service area, very limited. This is more nebulous. It looks as though you're moving the money to the CSLAC budget, so the admin would be CSLAC staff, but not Mr. Morrison or other people who would be involved in the contract or vetting this, which might hardly be eligible admin. And then the project management, again, the project management staff aren't within, they move around and do projects for everybody and then recover costs from the projects, but they do recover costs. We want project management on, say, skate park, Creston, we paid that time out of that budget. So the in-kind 10K is a little nebulous. That is effectively a rural admin cost. Is that going to be? Where would that actually come from on the real budget, doing a budget amendment, which again is unusual. Normally you don't do that. So I want to understand better where those pieces are coming from and where they're going to.
Staff?
Thank you, through the chair. The administrative allocation was a recommendation from the project management team. That's how that they allocate an administrative cost to cover the internal costs of carrying and managing the contract. The project management in-kind time would be most of my time, so sustainability planner, so that would come out of sustainability service. So it's both, all the funding is coming out of the sustainability service. It's true that there are other staff involved, and we can do some other allocations of that if it's needed. But at this point, it's to account for the costs that are required through the management of the project.
So to clarify, admin is what we would have traditionally seen as project management, spread through other departments. That's good because they're on a cost recovered basis, and I wanted that staff to be there from a decade and more ago. And then what's actually labeled as project management, we will see now a rejig of the monthly report of allocation of staff on your time.
Yeah.
On that report, it'll now become maybe 6% or something for so many months. Okay, that'll work.
Good. Thank you, staff, for that clarification. So in this spot, but I'll defer to Director Popoff and then I will comment after that. So Director Popoff, go ahead.
You may just want to, if Director Cunningham can mute, it'll help for those online further sound.
Thanks, Amy. Director Popoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is not a new concept. This has happened way before even I got elected, where the South Spokane Water System purchased the watershed that affected their water supply, and it was done through environmental services. So just to respond to being a new concept or whatever, this has been done before. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Popoff. So the comment that I want to make is that the importance of this that I perceive is that we are moving ahead specifically on a natural asset management approach to watershed governance. And this is going to have impact regardless of the ownership of the watershed or the water system. This is going to have impact on every watershed in the regional district, including Silverton. Who knew? So, I certainly support this. I appreciate the details that have been raised in the questions and comments, but I'm quite excited about this, actually. So where are we? We don't have anyone else on the speakers list. We have the motion moved and seconded, so I'm going to call the question. I'm just going to ask, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, this carries. Thank you, and well, Zowie. Then we go to new business, 8.1, funding application to water sustainability project in Yakanuki, Amakas of Tunaha, Preston Valley. And we have a committee report.
Thank you very much, through the chair. So just for clarification, Yakanuki Amakas means land in Tunaha, and so we're trying to respect how Yakanuki referred to the Creston Valley, and they refer to it as Yakanuki Amakas. And so as we go forward this project, we will be referring to it as Yakanuki Amakas Creston Valley. As I mentioned in the project updates, there has been some movement. We sent a letter to the province at the direction of CSLAC in partnership. It was co-signed by Chair Watson and Chief Nsukin Louis, and the province responded quite timely in a month and stated that they were supportive. They expressed enthusiasm for the work, and also stated that because of the election, they're not able to do anything officially until after the election. And they made recommendations to, from what they're learning in the only existing water sustainability plan process, which is in the Cowichan Valley in the Coxilla watershed, that this is a very costly and slow process. And so they encouraged us to seek resourcing and understand how we were going to fund this work. And then also that they expressed, they recommended that we clarify the goals. Staff met with Yakanuki last week at some period, and there's interest. There's currently a fund available through the water, or it's called the Watershed Sustainability Fund, and they have an intake that's open at the moment. And this is the type of work that they would support. And so staff are, with Yakinuki support, would like to submit an application from the RDCK for $150,000 to build out a project plan to provide time to develop the terms of reference, to do some initial engagement, not us as the RDCK, but Yakinuki working with their membership to do some initial engagement, and then also to have some funds available to work with residents, non-Yakinuki residents in the RDCK and water users in the RDCK. So it's funding to support an initial level of engagement and develop the project terms and scope.
Okay. Director Jackman.
You got me as well?
With some caution, I'm gonna make a very general statement here about understanding goals. It's, Paris just made a reference, RDCK staff has met with Yakinuki to clarify goals. 15 plus years ago, we met with Yakinuki, and there was some understanding on a person-to-person basis of whoever's still involved in that, and we had goals in minds. And as of just a month or two ago, some of the parties said, no, our goal from the outset was this, and others are saying, whoa, wasn't written down, wasn't very clear, and obviously there were a lot of side conversations in any process, so that goals that were fixed in the minds of some are not the goals that were fixed in the minds of others. So staff so far has had a conversation around goals where I won't say that any of the goals that we're perhaps beginning to formulate in one group's mind are the board's goals. And so great caution as to how we embark down this path. Is there a goal or expectation that Yakinuki will obtain, hold, and be the stewards of data as the stewards of water? Or is the goal more to support regional districts' more conventional role of water for agriculture, water for people, water for this and that? And those are different. There's a word in here at one point about conservation. Is there a goal around water protection? Or is the goal more water governance and use? Because if the goal primarily in the minds of some is protection, all the uses are below that. And the approval and expectation of what uses, expansion, economic growth would come around that would be subservient to the protection goal, and then protection goal for fish, for whatever. So if there's a conversation, and I see you're listening very intently, Manager Sudan, and I want you to, if there's a conversation or two where goals are set in the minds of people and an understanding of what the regional district goals are, they must realize all conversations at early stage are preliminary, and that this group and this board have not set the goals, primary goals around this project. And of course, we have another project which will run concurrently around directly agricultural water supply. So I would like to see briefing notes come out of the meetings, each meeting with staff, is it staff to staff or staff to council? Because we had a very early governing body to governing body meeting around this, and you were present. But I think that everybody who will make decisions on what the goals and the objectives as well have good understanding 15 years from now, have a track of briefing notes. Now, if it's confidential and not able to be shared, well, then there's a limit to how conversations should proceed and what some groups might understand as a goal, but then it's confidential. There's a limit to us even being in those conversations, because it may set unrealistic expectations or unrealistic constraints or guardrails on the future of all the residents in that valley. So I'm a little concerned about us documenting conversations and expectations, and very specifically because I could sit down and have a coffee with anybody and tell you how two concepts have diverged over the course of a decade and a half as to what another thing was all about. So I'd like to see some paperwork, some briefing notes. fairly soon. Thanks.
Steph,
Thank you. Thank you through the chair. Great comments. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your concerns. Yes, it's all very sensitive, it's all very tentative, and there's a lot of interest at stake. I would say that our conversation was very preliminary. There was just an expression, it was high level, and there's strong recognition that the decision makers aren't in the room. And so there was clear expression from the staff we met with that they needed to take it to their leadership, and likewise. So, and what we know of the Coxsala watershed process is that there is a formal process that emerges from the province where there's a government-to-government agreement. And through that process, the terms are articulated, and our hope is that we can participate as a third party. That would be a different model than to date. And that is the whole process of establishing the terms, is that we come to some formal understanding of what are your interests, what are our interests, and how do we find a place in between. So it's just, I would say, just to acknowledge that it is a process through this, that we, and I think that's clearly understood. For the Yakinuki to participate in this process, they need funding. And so that's what this enables, is this enables Yakinuki to participate more fully.
Can I clarify, Chair, is this money to be given to Yakinuki, or is this money to be held by the regional district and then apportioned to the best organization to do each component of the work that needs to be done as those components are identified?
The funding application would be done in joint partnership with Yakinuki. And one of the aspects of the application is a staff position with Yakinuki. And so it's funding for Yakinuki to support their staff in participating in the process.
With shared support for our staff time or no support?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, currently our staff time, me, is funded through CSLAC. And then additional funding would go to support engagement with residents, with our DCK residents in the Creston Valley. And there would be an administrative cost as well that would contribute.
And we won't see that draft because it's due this month.
This due this month, yeah.
Director Watson.
Thank you. I originally put my hand up just to make sure that, because the letter of feedback from the province was in between last week's board agenda and next month. So just if anybody wants a copy of that letter indicating essentially very interesting, apply for funding to do the work. It was a bit nebulous in their response, but that's not surprising. They just said, yes, apply. So if anyone wants to see that, or you're the bit that says, that encourages us just to let you know the province backed us applying. But I also want to speak to what Director Jackman raised, because there are, I want to first recognize that when we're talking about reconciliation, our form and character of conversations and relationships and agreements is very different than what we might be used to in our structured setting. So I think, and there's also the confluence of having objectives shift over years and different people in different conversations. So there is definitely, I share Director Jackson's concerns around continuity and what we're committing to, and continuity in a process, so that other processes that we've experienced aren't blindsiding us to expectations we were unaware of. So what I would like to request is two things. One is that anytime the elected officials, and I know that's not the right term for Yakinuki, but they are board and council, or sorry, chief and council are involved, we are involved as elected officials. I do not want staff to EOs on either side without equal representation, because there is that disconnect in conversations when it's staff and the actual decision makers are not in the room. So I think that that's one way to really review that. So if you're having conversations, if Ms. Louis is there or anyone else from that council, please ensure that Director Jackman and or myself are available and present. I really support the idea of briefing notes. If they're confidential, we have in camera for a reason. I think it's more important to ensure that that continuity of information is occurring on a regular basis, so that, again, we don't have these expectations we were unaware of, and that we can't commit to outside of a process that may not have been well described. So I think those are two avenues that I support this application, but in the different ways of managing not just assets and watersheds, but also in communications, that I think those two pieces will ensure that we're doing our due diligence, that what we commit to is feasible, we agree to, and also that we're in the loop on the longer term things that might need a succession that's beyond all of us. Because this is watershed, that's gonna go beyond all of us. So I will move the motion with the added note. And further that indicates regular briefing updates to the elected officials, and that elected officials are involved. What's the wording on that? Can I go to you, Director Jackman, for a minute?
Government to government.
Well, I'm trying to articulate the difference between staff to EOs and when that's not an even playing field. So we want elected officials involved when chief and council are involved. And if Director Jackman agrees with that, then I'm going to Director Jackman mostly because you raised it, and
I think it was to Chair cover my basic concerns. I'll second that, Shelley was able to capture.
I got the ending part of what you said, that elected officials are involved and chief and council are involved.
Yeah. Sure, government to government would be another way of forming this, yeah.
The meeting that we did have, sorry, through the chair, it was with staff, not with the elected officials. But yes, understood.
okay.
So, I do want to get the wording of this sorted out.
Yeah, could we have, it just said how clean.
So I will go to the motion in the agenda and then add my own further, so that the board directs staff to submit an application to the Watershed Security Fund for water sustainability for Yakinikiamacas, Creston Valley, in the amount of $150,000, and that if successful, grant funds be allocated to the S105 Community Sustainability Service. And further,
Briefing notes are provided.
briefing notes are provided to elected officials. And elected officials are engaged when chief and council are engaged. Not the most articulate, but that's what we got.
That's what we got.
Yeah.
I think it covers the topic. Do we have a second?
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, and,
And Graham.
okay, Sangeeta wanted to speak and Director Graham. So,
Oh, she was just seconding, sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, there's a lot of work and understanding that needs to happen, both, I guess, with us as a collective RDCK staff and board on reconciliation. And that I just want to park there. And then I want to address the concern that Director Jackman brought up around data. It is a concern I have too, because if we are the fund holders, how we manage that data, which is part of the deliverable, is key. And I am currently working through that process with Tanaka on the Kuki Lake partnership work. But ultimately, I just wanted to make this simple statement. And it's not that simple. Unfortunately, nothing is that simple. Reconciliation with First Nations across BC and Canada, and I guess under UNDRIP across the world, is really about those natural assets, to put it simply. Water and land and their way of life being impacted. And that's already happened. And trying to find a path back and being able to do that in a way that I think they feel sometimes vulnerable to, because there is this entrenched governance model in place across the world. I won't use the colonial word there, I used it, but that is entrenched in how we decision make. So that process of understanding each other's point of view requires a lot more relationship building, both at between staff and also at the elected official level. And I understand that that's not happened. At staff, we are working with all of the 3 First Nations. We haven't yet engaged Squepnik, but we are working with them. We are building staff and staff relationships and trying to understand how that all works. And I feel good about it because we have a positive working relationship there. And I hope to continue. I'll be bringing forward a report in August to the board related to First Nations engagement. And what we've been doing within this organization, and hopefully building on building on that report, we need to get direction from you all, the board, on what it is you need to be informed about. And I heard from Director Vandenberg at a Crescent Valley Services Committee, he was interested in learning more about UNDRA. So what you need to learn about in order for you to feel confident that when you go into meetings with chief and councils of the 4 First Nations that have expressed territorial interest in our region, that you come to those meetings in a well-informed way and in a way that builds relationships rather than not, because this train is not stopping. We're seeing that process underway right now at the provincial level, and it started when I was a provincial employee under the former government that was in power. So it's been a mandate of government in BC for many years due to lack of treaties. And so I just wanted to make that point. And modernized treaties are something First Nations are definitely getting into nowadays. So kind of fits in with that too. Although not sure how the Tanaka feel about it, but maybe the others. So I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. I have a speakers list. Hewitt, Davidoff, and Watson. Director Hill.
Thank you through the chair. If I understood you correctly, the full 150,000 would be passed on to the Akanuki, is that correct?
Thank you through the chair. No, we haven't actually broken down the numbers yet. I'm currently working with Isaac, but it's to support a staff position. So, and the intent of my proposal will be that it also includes funds for engagement, both within the Akanuki members and our DCK residents. So that would be probably about 20,000. There'd be an administration fund fee that would come back to us. So probably about 10,000. And so probably about 110 would go to a staff position.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify because it isn't noted, and what portion of sustainability it says S105, but does that come out of the S100 portion? And how does it fit within the work plan? Because reconciliation is a whole board initiative, not just a CSLAC initiative. So just wondering where that would fall.
Interesting. Thank you through the chair. I have been placing it within the WGI, the Watershed Governance Initiative budget, but an interesting question that it could be split and we could start to have a line item about reconciliation at the direction, yes, if that was the direction of CSLAC.
Sorry. Through the chair, if the intent, again, of this report that I'll bring forward in August is to work towards reconciliation, then that's a board decision and that would be a separate line item. We are working throughout our organization on multiple projects with First Nations. We have parks working with Civics Okanagan on restoration work in Norns Creek and Pass Creek. We have, parks also working at Crawford and some of the access trails. We've, Community Sustainability, been working on projects through the Kootenay Lake Partnership and Spokane Lake Partnership at Snipes and Civics. I mean, we are doing many things. I think reconciliation at the board level is more about the board working to understand First Nations perspective and then bringing that forward at the elected official level with those First Nations, both not at staff level, but at the chief and council level. And that's a different process. That hasn't been initiated.
Okay. Supplemental.
Okay.
How does this fit into the current work plan? Does the time have to be reallocated at all?
Thank you through the chair. No, it doesn't. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Davidoff.
Yeah, again, this is a bigger conversation. I'm just going to follow up on something that Manager Sudan said. In School District 20, we have a really complex issue about how do we initiate meetings with First Nations and things like that. Our RDCK board, as far as I remember, has not done a meeting with any First Nations as a whole board. And so this is something that I hope in August, we're going to see something in that report that Manager Sudan's going to be bringing because I think it's long overdue that our board be meeting with some event, a TRC type event with all First Nations in our area. And I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you, Director Davidoff. That's a very interesting point you're making, and it makes a whole bunch of things happen in my mind. We did sign an MOU with Yakanuki, as I recall, or did we not? We had something about protocols that we were going to follow. It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, through the chair, that has not happened as of yet.
Okay, so that's, maybe that will get addressed in your report, how we move forward, government to government. And Director Watson.
Thank you. Yeah, so the board did give support to and direction to staff to generate that MOU. We have not seen it come back yet. We don't need to know why right now, but please do address in your report where that item is at. I'm just going to reiterate some of the concerns regarding when it's a staff-to-staff conversation, or when staff are developing these relationships, that is not synonymous with the board developing relationships. And so there are concerns I have, and I'm just going to articulate first that the structure in which we govern does cause issues in terms of relationship building. When you have 20 people at this table, you have 5 people regarding staff. It's not an easy thing to do. So I'm not suggesting that staff is doing this nefariously in any way. It is really by default our structure. But one example is, and you've mentioned this a few times, that treaties are the tool. I would never agree with that. Treaties are a colonial tool. So I do have concerns over when we give direction to staff to build relationships that are not vetted back against the elected officials being involved in those relationship building. And I think it's also, again, I'm not saying that staff aren't necessarily eliminating us from the conversations, but there is a natural disconnect that builds a relationship that is short-sighted. And so I just need to name that when we're building these relationships. Oh, that's Director Graham. It's okay. We need to have more check-ins where staff are giving us updates on what's occurring, and it's vetted against what the board might be giving direction on, or at least the executive to some degree. Because those relationship building situations outside of the Kootenay Lake Partnership are not occurring. And we won't use the Kootenay Lake Partnership as a good example on how that occurred. So I think that it is the default of the structure we work in, and we need more stops and checks on what is occurring in that relationship building, and we need elected officials more involved in the relationship building component. And I would strongly recommend we stop using treaties as a tool. We know Tanaka is not interested in it. It's a colonial tool, and reconciliation is about moving beyond the colonial structure, which is where we get awkward, because that's the structure we work in. And I would never be shy to acknowledge the fact that we are a colonial government. That's how we were created. And so just want to put those cautions out there, and in your report, please contemplate how elected officials can be a part of that relationship building process, because again, if it's just staff, it's not the board, and it's not the RDCK as a whole. And it's easy for people to lose sight of that, even as a resident who's like, oh, the RDCK said, I'm like, well, sorry, our staff said that. That's not the same thing as the board doing it. And it's not intentional, but it is how it works. Sorry, I just realized we got a meeting in 10 minutes. Not your fault, sorry.
So, Sagini, did you want to comment on that? And then I believe, Cheryl, did you want to speak? No, okay, go ahead.
Just quickly, all of our processes working with Indigenous nations have been organic, and through the interest to work towards reconciliation at the board is new, and definitely there's interest, so we want to pursue that. When I speak a treaty, I understand the old treaties are definitely not functional. However, First Nations are working towards modernizing the treaty process that fits them with the provincial government. Nothing I'm involved in, so I'm not. I have been told by First Nations that there is a move afoot there. So that's more for us to keep an eye on. And last, senior management has a standing item on First Nations initiatives that we're working on. We report to each other. My assumption, and I can talk to the CAO, is that that information is then communicated to you by the CAO. But if not, we can definitely make that an item, and I will raise it at the next senior management meeting that we bring to you on a regular basis.
So just supplemental to that?
Yes.
Happy to figure out a way to better hear back from you. This is actually about building relationships as elected officials with First Nations. So I think there needs to be a bit of a metric around if there's been this many staff to staff meetings, it's time to bring in the elected officials. So that would just be one metric that, as an example, so when you do your report, this is essentially me saying, please include how we're going to increase elected official relationship building.
And my comment on that is that I absolutely echo everything that you've said, Director Watson, and I think it is time to be including the elected officials, as that's where government to government actually exists, regardless of the fact that staff does most of the work. That reporting regularly on what work we are doing as an organization towards reconciliation or within that reconciliation, the elected officials need to know that. Otherwise, we are very likely to trip over our own feet with our people and with the nations that we're engaging with. So we have a resolution on the table that the board directs staff to submit an application to the Watershed Security Fund for water sustainability for Yakanuki and Marcus Creston Valley in the amount of $150,000, and that if successful, grant funds be allocated to S105 Community Sustainable Living Service. And further, Shelley, can you read the and further part?
And further briefing notes are provided to elected officials, and elected officials are engaged when chief and council are engaged.
Thank you. I've worked through the speakers list, so I'm going to call the question and I will ask, is anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Thank you very much. Item 8.2 for information, revision of CSLAC terms of reference. That will not come to us until the August CSLAC meeting. And that will be a major agenda item at that time. And 8.3, Director Graham.
Thank you. So through the chair, I'm still pretty new here, so I really am somewhat responding to some of the things that Director Watson was saying at the last CSLAC meeting, and today I think is not really a good example of why I was asking if we wanted to reduce our number of meetings. But I just kind of thought, it occurred to me from the last meeting where I don't think we even had a single thing to vote on, that it might be better or an idea for director's time management to have like 4 meetings a year instead of 6, which would align with the quarterly plan and just sort of align quarterly. And I think Director Popoff had told me that this had been discussed before. So I just kind of thought, like I say, in terms of time management, I don't need really, if anybody has anything to say here, I'm new, but I just wanted to ask the question, just purely for time management.
Okay, so we'll consider it a question being asked, and Sangeeta would like to respond.
So through the chair, the reason why there hasn't been a lot of activity at CSLAC has been due to the fact that Paris Marshall Smith has been working on the climate actions or climate ideas that was just recently adopted. And based on the updates that was provided, her focus is now shifting back to those initiatives that are on the CSLAC priority list, such as watershed governance. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, Director Watson.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think what's important to note here is we can always cancel meetings. I think what the terms of reference indicates is if we reduce them in the terms of reference, that means that changing, if we need to add a meeting, it's a little more difficult. I would rather stick to what we have and really rely on the chair to be diligent. Is this essential right now? If it's one item, could it be done at board? Things like that. So it's always the opportunity to cancel a meeting. And perhaps I would take your question as a direction to the chair and the staff to use diligent lens in assessing if a meeting is absolutely necessary. I would have agreed with you when looking at this agenda, Director Graham, that maybe it wasn't super necessary. But after the discussion, I'm like, that was actually good. And sometimes our committees, we know a board, I'm a little strict on time because we have a lot to cover. So committees can be that flexible time to dive into the things we don't get to discuss at other times in detail. And I do tend to appreciate them. So I'd rather see that we stick to the 6 and cancel when it's really not necessary. That would be my suggestion. And you have pop up on the list.
Okay, Director Popoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Should this not be part of the revision of CSLAC terms of reference, and we can debate that? And a follow-up on that one is, do we have any information on revision of CSLAC terms of reference? Has there been any suggestions what changes we're going to make?
Staff.
Thank you, through the chair. There's a new template for committee terms and procedures. And so staff are preparing the terms to be in that format, and that's taking longer than expected. And so that's why we've deferred the review of the terms of reference to August, or requested the review to August. There are 2 considerations. This is the number of meetings per year is the second one. The first one that was brought up was by Director Vandenberg, just clarifying that the scope and be updated to current scope, and namely that's around housing. So removing housing from CSLAC's scope of work, if I understood correctly.
Okay. Yeah, I have to echo Director Watson's comments about committees being where we get into deeper discussion about individual topics. Yeah, we come to board, often things are presented and we are told this has already come through committee. So if you're going to make changes, you're overriding what happened in committee. Committees are where we have these discussions, and yes, paying attention to the number of items that are on a proposed agenda. Sometimes we will, we might have to say, look, that can wait. We have nothing else to discuss. But committees are where we talk, where we discuss, where we get into these, the smaller details. And I really appreciate it. So, Director Graham, I think that, that can be brought up in the discussion around terms of reference. And we'll have more discussion about it then. But thank you for bringing that to us. Is there anyone from the public online that would like to ask a question? I see one member of the public, so if you have any questions or comments you wanted to make, just go ahead and speak now.
Chair.
Okay.
I had pushback at a rural meeting lately where somebody typed in as we had ended the meeting, there is public here or something. So we had a brief conversation. We say calling for public input first time, second time, third and final time. Like,
okay.
I wasn't sure where that person was going. They didn't have time to unmute and I cut them off, but we ended the meeting with about as much waiting as you gave, and I got pushback.
Okay, well, for a second time, I'll call for comments or questions from the public. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. And asking for the third time for questions or comment from the member of public who is present at this meeting. If you wanted to unmute yourself. And I am not seeing that happening, so I will assume that you are satisfied that you understood what was going on. And that brings us to item 10. Next meeting is scheduled for August 13th, 2024 at 1 p.m. I thank everyone for accommodating the change in date of this meeting from last week to this week. And I would call for a motion to adjourn.
But can I make a comment? Can we make sure that the old WebEx invitations are retracted, so we can all have the right one.
Yeah.
Avoid what happened
That's
earlier.
for
I
all
heard-
meetings.
I
It's for
heard-
all meetings.
Oh, okay.
It's not just CSLAC.
I heard from IT, and when the Zoom is being scheduled, there's a little button that links it to Teams. So Angela has requested IT put that step in the scheduling thing that they have, so
Okay.
that's what happened. It was highlighted, and so it linked our Zoom to the Teams.
Okay, okay, thank you. Bye, we are adjourned. Yes, thank you, everyone. See
And
most
I'm
of you
just
at
gonna run
transit
to
this
the washroom
afternoon.
and then
Yeah.
I'll take you over to the other side.